Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The thing about working in a place where half your coworkers could accidentally kill you just by sneezing too hard is that you develop a very specific kind of situational awareness. Bella had that awareness. She'd cultivated it over 3 years at the Galactic Conservatory on Meridian Prime, where species from 18 different star systems congregated to study, argue about, and occasionally set fire to rare botanical specimens. Not on purpose, mind you. Well, mostly not on purpose. On this particular morning, station time, because actual morning was a meaningless concept when you lived in a rotating metal can in space, Bella was elbow-deep in phosphorescent moss that glowed like someone had liquefied the northern lights and convinced it to grow on rocks. The stuff was temperamental, required a humidity level so precise you could sneeze and ruin a month's worth of growth, and had a disturbing tendency to hum when it was unhappy. Right now, it was humming. Loudly. "Oh, come on," Bella muttered, adjusting the atmospheric regulator for the 3rd time. "I literally gave you everything you wanted. What more do you need? A symphony? Candles? Should I read you poetry?" The moss continued its disgruntled vibration. She was so focused on her botanical drama that she almost missed the sound of heavy footfalls approaching through the public garden section. Almost. But when something weighing approximately 300 pounds of solid muscle and reptilian armor is heading your way, you tend to notice. Bella glanced up and immediately straightened, brushing dirt off her work suit. Counselor Ramoth was making his way down the garden path, and trailing behind him, because the universe apparently had a sense of humor, was his son, Pip. Now, Pip was what the Silrathi called a cub, though the term was doing some heavy lifting, considering the kid was already the size of a full-grown human and possessed teeth that could punch through hull plating. The Silrathi were apex predators from a world where evolution had apparently decided that subtlety was for losers. They stood upright, moved with the fluid grace of something that had never met a food chain it couldn't dominate, and had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Their culture was equally intense, hierarchical, honor-bound, and with family structures so sacred that interfering with a parent-cub relationship was considered just slightly less offensive than detonating a star. Bella knew all this because the conservatory had made everyone sit through a 6-hour cultural sensitivity seminar after a human intern had tried to pat a Silrathi cub on the head and nearly caused a diplomatic incident. The intern had survived, barely, and now worked in a nice, safe office job filing paperwork somewhere far from anything with claws. "Counselor," Bella said, offering a polite nod. She didn't bow. Humans didn't bow to Silrathi. That was apparently insulting. But she kept her posture respectful and her hands visible. "The crystalline orchids in Section 9 are blooming if you wanted to. We will observe them." "Yes," Ramoth said, his voice a deep rumble that you felt in your chest more than heard with your ears. "The young one has interest in bioluminescent flora. It is educational." Pip, for his part, was staring at Bella's phosphorescent moss with the kind of wide-eyed fascination that transcended species. His head tilted, scales catching the artificial light, and his tail, thick as Bella's thigh, swished back and forth with barely contained excitement. Kids. Didn't matter if they were human, Silrathi, or sentient clouds of gas. Show them something that glowed, and they were hooked. "It hums when it's growing," Bella offered, because why not engage in some light interspecies education? The frequency changes based on its metabolic rate. Pretty cool, right? Pip's eyes, brilliant gold with vertical pupils, widened further. He leaned forward, snout nearly touching the moss container. "Carefully," Ramoth warned, one massive hand resting on his son's shoulder. "The researcher requires space to work." "It's fine," Bella said, waving off the concern. "He's not hurting anything. Honestly, it's nice to have someone appreciate the moss. Most people just complain about the noise." She turned back to her atmospheric controls, making minute adjustments while keeping one ear on the Silrathi pair. Ramoth was asking his son questions in their native language, a series of clicks, growls, and harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't reproduce even with a month of practice and a complete disregard for personal dignity. Pip responded with enthusiastic chirps, his attention fixed on the glowing moss. Everything was perfectly normal. Routine. Just another day in the Galactic Conservatory where humans and aliens coexisted in... The alarm was what hit first. Not a gentle warning chime, but a full-throated shriek that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong somewhere in the station's vast network of systems. Bella's head snapped up, training kicking in. Red emergency lights strobed to life overhead, painting the garden in hellish, pulsing color. "Attention," the station's AI announced in that perfectly calm voice that somehow made everything worse. "Security Protocol Delta is now active. All personnel should." The rest of the announcement was drowned out by a sound Bella had only heard in training simulations. The high-pitched whine of charging plasma weapons. She spun around and felt her heart attempt to exit her body through her throat. A security drone. One of the floating spheres that usually just drifted around, looking intimidating and occasionally asking people if they had proper clearance, was hovering at the entrance to her garden section. But this wasn't the usual passive observation mode. Its weapon ports were open, plasma coils glowing that particular shade of blue-white that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. And it was pointing directly at Pip. The cub had wandered away from his father, drawn by the commotion, and now stood in the open about 10 meters from Bella. His posture was curious, not defensive. He had no idea he was in danger. Bella's brain, that wonderful organ that spent most of its time helping her remember plant Latin names and wondering what was for lunch, suddenly shifted into a gear she didn't know she possessed. The math was simple and terrible. Plasma charge time, approximately 2 seconds. Distance between drone and Pip, maybe 8 meters. Distance between Bella and Pip, 10 meters. Ramoth's position, blocked by a decorative rock formation, he couldn't reach his son in time. Time slowed down the way it does when your life decides to become memorable for all the wrong reasons. Bella didn't think, couldn't afford to think, because thinking would have involved acknowledging what a plasma blast did to human tissue, and that knowledge would have frozen her in place. Instead, she ran. Her legs pumped, boots finding purchase on the garden path. The drone's targeting system, clearly malfunctioning because since when did security drones shoot at visiting diplomats' children, continued its lock. The whine pitched higher. Pip looked up, finally sensing something was wrong. His golden eyes found Bella, confusion written across his reptilian features. She hit him like a linebacker, arms wrapping around his scaled torso, using her momentum to shove him sideways and down. The cub yelped in surprise as they tumbled together behind a planter box. And then the world turned white and became nothing but pain. Plasma bolts don't really make a sound when they hit you. There's a crackling, sure, like electric fire, but mostly what you notice is the sensation of every nerve ending in your body, screaming simultaneously. Bella felt the impact hit her back, her right shoulder, her side. The smell of burning fabric and flesh hit her nose. she'd gotten Pip out of the way. That was good. That was the important thing. The ground rushed up to meet her, or maybe she fell toward it. Hard to tell when your sensory input was mostly just reporting pain, pain, and more pain with a side order of things are very bad. Somewhere in the chaos, she heard Ramoth roaring, an earth-shaking sound of pure fury. Heard the drone explode, probably torn apart by 300 pounds of enraged Silrathi father. Heard running footsteps, shouts, the station alarm still wailing like the universe's worst soundtrack. And underneath her, pressed against the cold garden floor, she felt Pip squirming. Alive. Unharmed. "Stay down," Bella managed to whisper, though her voice sounded wrong, thin and breathless. "Stay. Just stay." Her vision was doing funny things, tunneling at the edges. She was aware of Pip's scales against her arms, cool and smooth. Aware of warmth spreading across her back that was probably blood, and definitely not. Supposed to be outside her body. Someone was screaming for medical. Someone else was yelling about the drone's malfunction. Ramoth's voice, closer now, speaking rapid-fire Silrathi, that her universal translator was too overwhelmed to parse. Bella felt hands, no, claws, careful despite their size, gently rolling her off Pip. She caught a glimpse of the cub's face, his eyes enormous, his mouth open in distress. Then Ramoth's face filled her vision, and she'd never seen a Silrathi look afraid before, but there it was, plain as day. "Human," he said, the word barely more than a growl. "Human, you will. Medical is coming. You will." "Pip okay?" Bella asked, because priorities. "He lives. Because of... You moved?" Ramoth's composure, that iron control the Silrathi were famous for, cracked. "Why? Why would you?" The answer was so obvious, Bella almost laughed, except laughing would hurt, and she was already at her pain capacity for the day. "He's a kid," she said simply. "Kids don't get hurt. That's the rule." Somewhere in her fading consciousness, she was aware of Pip pressing close, making distressed chirping sounds. She wanted to tell him it was okay, that she was fine, but her mouth wasn't cooperating anymore. The last thing she heard before the darkness came up and pulled her under was the sound of Ramoth's voice, speaking in heavily accented standard, saying something that sounded almost like a prayer. And then, nothing. Just the quiet and the dark and the distant fading awareness that she'd done something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. Definitely both. But Pip was alive, and somehow, that made it worth it. Bella woke up to the sound of arguing, which was not how anyone wanted to start their day, especially when that day came after getting shot with a plasma weapon. Her eyelids felt like they'd been glued shut, but she managed to pry them open. White ceiling, sterile smell, the faint beep of medical monitors, so, Medbay. That tracked. Completely unacceptable, and I don't care what your cultural protocols say, you cannot just... That was a human voice, male, with the kind of irritated authority that suggested military background. The human placed herself between death and my offspring. That was definitely Ramoth, and his voice carried an edge that could cut steel. By Silrathi law, she is under my family's protection. This is not negotiable. Everything's negotiable, counselor. That's literally what diplomacy is. Bella tried to sit up, and immediately regretted every life choice that had led to this moment. Pain bloomed across her back and shoulder like someone had replaced her nerve endings with live wires. "Oh, no, you don't," another voice said, and gentle hands pressed her back down. "You've got second-degree plasma burns across 30% of your back and a cracked rib from when you decided to tackle a Silrathi cub. Lying down is not a suggestion. It's the law. Bella's eyes focused on the speaker. Human, middle-aged, with the kind of tired eyes that came from working too many double shifts. His name tag read Wren and identified him as a doctor. Pip? Bella croaked. Her throat felt like she'd been gargling sandpaper. The cub is fine, completely unharmed thanks to you and your apparent death wish. Wren held up a scanner, checking her vitals. Though I should mention that tackling a Silrathi, even a young one, is typically not recommended for people who enjoy having intact spines. The arguing voices had stopped. Bella turned her head. Carefully, everything hurt, and saw two figures standing near the Medbay entrance. One was Ramoth, his scales catching the harsh medical lighting. The other was a human man in station security uniform, built like someone who'd spent quality time with a gym and had opinions about protein intake. "She's awake," Ramoth said, and crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped at the foot of her bed, his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Bella want to check if she'd accidentally insulted his ancestors. "Human, you live." "Bella," she said, because apparently near-death experiences made her pedantic about names. "And, yeah, apparently I'm harder to kill than expected." "How's Pip? Really?" "My son is unharmed. He has not left the waiting area since you were brought here." Ramoth's clawed hand gripped the bed frame, and Bella heard the metal creak under the pressure. "You threw yourself into plasma fire for him. You, who are not of our people, not of our blood. You did this." It wasn't a question, but it sounded like Ramoth was trying to make it make sense in his head. "He's a kid," Bella said, echoing her earlier words. That's just what you do." The human security officer stepped forward, and Bella got a better look at him. Solid, competent-looking, with gray at his temples, and the kind of face that had seen things and filed them away for future reference. "Commander Silas," he introduced himself. "Station security. And I need to inform you that you're currently at the center of a diplomatic incident that's spiraling out of control faster than a ship with no brakes." Bella blinked. What?" "The footage," Silas said, pulling up a holographic display with a flick of his wrist. "From the garden. Security cameras caught everything. And when I say everything, I mean the whole galaxy has now watched a human woman throw herself in front of a plasma blast to save a Silrathi cub. It's been viewed 800 million times in the last 6 hours. You're famous." The hologram showed her garden from an overhead angle. There was Pip, there was the drone, there was Bella running, and the moment of impact that made her current pain make a lot more sense in retrospect. The video froze on the image of her collapsed over Pip, shielding him with her body. "Oh," Bella said weakly. I just—" "You created a problem," came a new voice, sharp. "And nasal. A centauri, tall, gray-skinned, with 3 eyes and the kind of expression that suggested the universe had personally inconvenienced them, swept into the Medbay. A significant problem. I am Station Director Falwyn, and do you have any idea how much paperwork is involved when someone nearly dies saving a diplomatic visitor's offspring?" "Sorry," Bella offered, "because what else do you say to that?" "The Silrathi High Command has been in emergency session for the past 4 hours, Falwyn continued, ignoring her apology. "Half of them are calling you a hero. The other half are calling you a manipulative political operative who staged the entire incident to gain leverage over their people." Bella's brain, still fuzzy from painkillers, took a moment to process that. "Wait, they think I got myself shot on purpose? For politics?" The hardline faction, led by war chieftain Gorshek, is convinced this is a human plot, Silas said, his expression grim. They're saying you interfered in a sacred family matter, that by touching Pip without explicit parental permission, you violated their cultural laws. They want you surrendered to Silrathi justice. That's insane, Bella said. The drone malfunctioned. It was going to kill him. We know that, Silas replied. Anyone with eyes and a functioning brain knows that. But politics doesn't care about sense. It cares about leverage. And right now, you're the biggest piece of leverage in this sector. Ramoth's growl filled the room, a subsonic rumble that made the medical equipment rattle. They will not touch her. I have declared her under my family's protection. To harm her is to declare blood feud with my entire clan. Which is exactly why this is escalating, Falwyn snapped, their three eyes blinking in agitation. Counselor, you're a moderate. Gorshek leads the military faction. If this turns into a clan dispute, we're looking at civil war within your species, and this station becomes ground zero. Bella's head was starting to hurt worse than her burns. Can someone please explain this in small words? I'm a botanist. I work with plants. Plants don't have complicated political structures. Dr. Wren, who'd been quietly monitoring her vitals, snorted. Short version? You saved a Silrathi cub. Their culture has very specific honor codes about life debts, especially involving children. Counselor Ramoth says you're family now. War Chieftain Gorshek says you're a criminal. Neither side is backing down. And the fleet? Silas added. There's a Silrathi battle group currently 6 days out. 50 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. They're coming here, and Gorshek is leading them personally. The room went very quiet. Bella stared at the ceiling and wondered if the universe accepted returns on life-changing decisions made in split seconds. 50 ships, she repeated, because I pushed a kid out of the way of a malfunctioning drone. Because you revealed something the Silrathi didn't think possible, Ramoth said quietly. We are taught that other species are self-preserving above all else, that they would not sacrifice themselves for our young. You proved that teaching wrong, and some of my people cannot accept that their understanding of the universe is flawed. So what happens now? Bella asked. Silas and Falwyn exchanged looks, the kind of looks that suggested the answer was not going to be pleasant. Now, Silas said slowly, we try to keep you alive and keep this station from becoming a war zone. In that order, preferably both at once. Human fleets are mobilizing, Falwyn added, but they're weeks away. Earth government is screaming about protecting their citizens. The Silrathi are screaming about jurisdiction and cultural sovereignty. Everyone is screaming, basically, and you're the reason why. Bella closed her eyes. Her back hurt. Her ribs hurt. Her head hurt. And apparently, she'd accidentally started an interstellar incident that might end in actual warfare. Can I see Pip? She asked quietly. Ramoth's expression softened, as much as a face full of scales and teeth could soften. He has asked for you, many times. He does not understand why the soft one with gentle hands will not wake up to see him. The soft one with gentle hands is awake now, Bella said. And if the galaxy's going to implode over this anyway, I'd at least like to make sure he knows I'm okay. Dr. Wren looked at Silas, who looked at Falwyn, who threw up their hands in defeat. Fine, the station director said. But if this somehow makes everything worse, I'm putting it in my official report that I objected. Noted, Bella said dryly. And somewhere outside the Medbay, a Silrathi cub waited to see the human who'd decided he was worth dying for. The thing about becoming an interstellar incident while recovering from plasma burns is that rest becomes a theoretical concept rather than an actual possibility. Bella learned this over the next 6 days as her medbay room transformed into an impromptu diplomatic staging ground. Day 1 post-consciousness involved Pip. The cub had been escorted in by Ramoth, moving with uncharacteristic hesitation. The moment he saw Bella propped up in bed, still connected to various monitors and looking like she'd lost an argument with a fusion reactor, his eyes went wide. "It's okay," Bella had said, keeping her voice soft. "See? Still here. Still in one piece. Mostly." Pip had approached slowly, his claws clicking on the medbay floor. When he reached her bedside, he'd done something that made Ramoth inhale sharply. The cub had very carefully, very gently, placed his snout against Bella's uninjured hand. "You saved Pip," he'd said in standard, his accent thick but understandable. "You took the fire. For Pip." "Yeah, well," Bella replied, "someone had to. And I was closer." "Pip was scared," the cub continued, his voice dropping. "The light was wrong. The machine was angry. But you moved fast. Like hunting. But protecting." Something about the way he said it made Bella's chest tight. "You're okay. That's what matters." Pip had stayed for 20 minutes, mostly just sitting beside her bed, occasionally touching her hand as if confirming she was real. When Ramoth finally took him away, the counselor had looked at Bella with an expression she couldn't quite parse. "My son has not spoken since the incident," he'd said quietly. "Until now. Until you." That had been day 1. Day 2 brought bureaucrats, lawyers, and enough official documentation to choke a freighter. Falwyn had arrived with a Centauri legal team, all clutching datapads and looking like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. "We need your statement," Falwyn had said, 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "Official record. What you saw, what you did, why you did it." Bella had given them the truth. Saw the drone. Saw Pip. Saw the danger. Reacted. Simple as that. "You didn't consider the political ramifications?" one of the lawyers asked, stylus poised over their datapad. "I considered that a kid was about to get turned into vapor," Bella had replied. "The politics didn't really make the list of priorities." They'd typed that down, somehow making it sound both more and less important than it actually was. Day 3 brought news that the Silrathi fleet had entered the outer system. 50 warships, moving at speed, making no effort to hide their approach. Station sensors tracked them, and suddenly every conversation in Meridian Prime involved words like evacuation procedures and defensive positions. Silas had visited that evening, his expression grim. "Earth's government wants to extract you. Get you off the station, somewhere safe. The Silrathi can't demand your surrender if you're not here." "And leave everyone else to deal with a war fleet looking for me?" Bella had asked. "That's not exactly solving the problem." "It's solving the keep you alive part of the problem," Silas countered, "which is my primary job description at the moment." "What does Ramoth say?" Silas had rubbed his face. "He says moving you would be an insult to his protection oath. That his family's honor is now tied to your safety. Which is great, except his family's honor is now directly opposing a war chieftain with enough firepower to crack a moon." Bella had stared at the ceiling, counting the tiles because it was easier than contemplating the absurdity of her situation. "How did my life become a political thriller? I study Moss. Moss doesn't have opinions about interstellar diplomacy. Your Moss also doesn't throw itself at plasma weapons," Silas had pointed out. "Fair." Day 4 brought protesters. Apparently, Word had spread through the station's civilian population, and people had opinions. Some thought Bella was a hero who'd prevented a tragedy. Others thought she was a reckless idiot who'd overstepped cultural boundaries. A few seemed convinced she was part of an elaborate conspiracy involving 3 governments and a plot to destabilize the sector. "That last group gives me way too much credit," Bella had told Dr. Wren as he changed her bandages. "I can barely manage a conspiracy to steal extra dessert from the commissary." Wren had chuckled. "How's the pain?" "Less, being actively on fire, and more, got hit by an angry shuttle." "So, improving?" "That's the spirit." Day 5 brought the actual footage analysis. Intelligence specialists from both human and Silrathi delegations had dissected every frame of the security video. They'd measured angles, calculated response times, analyzed the drone's malfunction signature. Their conclusion, delivered in a joint briefing that Bella attended via hologram because standing was still ambitious, was simple. The drone had suffered a catastrophic software glitch. Pure accident. No sabotage, no conspiracy, just bad luck, and worse timing. "Does this change anything?" Bella had asked. The long silence from the assembled officials had been answer enough. "Gorshek isn't disputing the malfunction," Silas had finally said. "He's disputing your response. Claims you had no right to touch a Silrathi cub under any circumstances, that you should have alerted Ramoth and let him handle it." "There wasn't time," Bella protested. "The charge was already—" "We know. Everyone with a brain knows. But this stopped being about facts around day 2. Now it's about pride, honor, and whose version of reality gets to be official." Day 6 began with alarms. Not malfunction alarms this time, but the specific tone that meant incoming ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Bella had been cleared for limited walking, slow, painful, but possible, so she made her way to the observation deck. The view stopped her mid-step. Space was full of ships. Silrathi warships, massive and angular, their hulls covered in the same oil-sheen scales as their creators. Dreadnoughts the size of city blocks, cruisers bristling with weapon arrays, fighter squadrons moving in precise formation. It was the largest military fleet Bella had ever seen, outside of historical documentaries about the last war. And they were here because she'd pushed a kid out of harm's way. "Impressive, isn't it?" Ramoth's voice came from behind her. She turned to find the counselor standing with Pip at his side. "Gorshek makes a statement with his arrival." "That's one word for it," Bella said. "Terrifying is another." "They will demand your surrender," Ramoth said quietly. "Tomorrow, perhaps the next day. Gorshek will call a council, and he will insist you face Silrathi justice for violation of our sacred laws. And if I refuse, then he will take you by force." Ramoth's claws flexed. "Which I cannot allow. Which means bloodshed. War between factions. My people. Killing my people. Over a human who saved my child." Bella watched the fleet maneuver into positions around the station. "I could surrender. End this. Before it starts." "No," Pip said suddenly, his voice sharp. Soft One saved Pip. Pip's family protects Soft One. This is law." "Your son understands more than I gave him credit for," Bella said. "He understands honor," Ramoth replied. "As do I. You will not surrender. I will not allow it." A new voice crackled over the observation deck's comm system. "All diplomatic personnel to Conference Room 1. Immediately. The Silrathi delegation requests formal parley." Bella's stomach dropped. "That's it, then. They're here." Silas appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Gorshek's shuttle just docked. He's demanding an audience, with you, in person. Is that safe? Bella asked. Absolutely not, Silas said. Which is why I'm going with you, along with every security officer I can stuff into that conference room without it looking like we're expecting trouble. But you are expecting trouble. I'm always expecting trouble. It's my baseline state of existence. The walk to Conference Room 1 felt longer than it actually was. Every step reminded Bella of her injuries, and every reminder of her injuries made her think about how she'd gotten them, which led to thinking about Pip and the drone and the moment when time had stopped, and nothing mattered except getting a kid out of danger. She'd do it again. That was the thing. Even knowing everything that came after, she'd still do it again. The conference room doors opened, and Bella got her first look at War Chieftain Gorshek. He was bigger than Ramoth, broader across the shoulders, with scales that were darker and edged with what looked like old scars. His eyes were cold, calculating, and fixed on Bella with the intensity of a predator assessing prey. "So," he said, his voice like grinding stone, "you are the human who has caused such disruption. You are smaller than I expected." Bella, tired and in pain, and thoroughly done with the week she'd been having, looked up at the war chieftain and said, "Yeah, well, you're exactly as dramatic as I expected. So I guess we're both full of surprises." Silas made a strangled sound. Falwyn looked like they might faint. Ramoth's expression was unreadable, and Gorshek, terrifying war chieftain of the Silrathi fleet, did something unexpected. He laughed. Not a kind laugh, exactly, but genuine, surprised. "Dramatic," he repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, perhaps I am. And perhaps you are more than you appear, small human. We shall see. Tomorrow, you face the trials, and then we will know if your actions were born of honor or manipulation." "Trials?" Bella asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew the answer. "3 tests," Gorshek said. "Ancient law. Prove your intent was pure, or face judgment. This is my offer, the only offer. Accept, or I take you by force this night." Bella looked at Ramoth, at Silas, at Pip's worried face, then back at Gorshek. "When do we start?" The trials began at dawn, or what passed for dawn on a space station, where the lighting cycled on a timer and actual sunrise was a memory from planets far away. Bella had slept poorly, her dreams full of plasma fire and golden eyes and the feeling of scales under her hands. Dr. Wren had loaded her up with enough painkillers to take the edge off her burns without dulling her mind completely, which she appreciated right until she realized having a clear head meant understanding exactly how much danger she was walking into. The arena, because of course the Silrathi had built an arena on Meridian Prime for settling disputes, was circular, maybe 50 meters across, with observation galleries rising on all sides. Those galleries were packed. Humans, Silrathi, Centauri, and half a dozen other species, all watching as Bella was escorted onto the sand-covered floor. Gorshek stood at the center, wearing ceremonial armor that looked like it had been forged from starlight and bad intentions. Beside him was a hovering platform displaying 3 objects: a crystalline egg roughly the size of a human head, a simple metal pole, and what looked like a ceremonial blade. "The human arrives," Gorshek announced, his voice carrying across the arena without need for amplification. "Bella of Earth, you claim your actions were pure, that you saved the cub Pip from death without thought of gain or manipulation. Today, you prove this claim, or you are judged false." Bella stepped forward, her legs steadier than she'd expected. In the gallery, she spotted Ramoth, with Pip pressed close to his side, Silas and his security team. Falwyn looking like they'd aged 10 years in the last week, and thousands of others, all watching, waiting. No pressure. The first trial, Gorshek continued, gesturing to the crystalline egg. The maze of instinct. You will enter a holographic construct filled with threats. You will carry this egg, which represents a Silrathi life. If the egg breaks, you fail. If you abandon the egg to save yourself, you fail. If you complete the maze with the egg intact, you pass. He paused, his eyes narrowing. The maze will hurt you. The threats will be real pain, real fear. Your injuries from the plasma blast will make this difficult, perhaps impossible. You may withdraw now, accept judgment, and face punishment with dignity. Bella looked at the egg, then at Gorshek, then up at Pip in the gallery. The cub's eyes were wide, his small claws gripping his father's arm. "Where's the maze?" she asked. Gorshek's expression might have been approval. "Hard to tell." "Here." The arena floor shimmered, and suddenly Bella was standing at the entrance to a tunnel that definitely hadn't existed 2 seconds ago. Holographic technology, incredibly advanced, capable of creating environments that looked, sounded, and apparently felt completely real. She picked up the egg. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and pulsed with a faint internal light. Cradling it carefully, she entered the maze. The first threat came fast. A holographic predator, all teeth and claws, lunging from a side passage. Bella's instinct was to dodge, but dodging meant potentially dropping the egg. Instead, she turned, protecting the egg with her body, and felt the holographic claws rake across her already injured back. The pain was real. Holographic damage translated to neural stimulation that felt identical to actual injury. She gasped, stumbled, but kept the egg secure. The maze twisted and turned. More threats came, falling debris that she had to shield the egg from, narrow passages that scraped her shoulders, sudden drops that jarred her spine. Every impact reminded her that she was still healing, that her body was working overtime just to keep moving. But she'd taken a plasma blast for Pip. This was just pain with extra steps. When she finally emerged from the maze exit, the egg still clutched against her chest and glowing softly, the arena erupted in mixed reactions. Some cheered, some sat silent. Gorshek simply nodded. "You passed the first trial," he said. "You protected the life above your own comfort. But this proves only instinct, not commitment." Bella set the egg down carefully and tried not to visibly shake. Her back was screaming, her ribs felt like they'd been used as a drum set, and they weren't even done yet. "The second trial," Gorshek announced, gesturing to the metal pole. "The stand of resolve. You will hold this pole upright. It will grow heavier. Your arms will tire. Your injuries will protest. When you can no longer bear the weight, you will drop it. The question is not if you drop it, human. The question is how long you endure before self-preservation overtakes commitment." This trial was simpler, but somehow worse. Bella gripped the pole, already heavier than it looked, and held it vertical. For the first minute, it was manageable. Uncomfortable, but manageable. Then the weight increased. Not dramatically, but steadily, like someone was slowly pouring sand into an invisible container attached to the pole. Her arms began to burn. Her shoulders, already abused from the maze, started sending urgent messages that this was a terrible idea. 2 minutes. 3. The weight kept increasing. Her hands were slipping despite her best effort. Her vision narrowed to just the pole, just the need to keep it upright. In the gallery, she could hear Pip making distressed sounds, could hear Ramoth speaking to him in their language, probably explaining the trial, maybe explaining why the soft one was suffering. 4 minutes. The pole felt like it weighed as much as she did. Her arms were shaking. Tears were running down her face, not from sadness, but from pure physical strain, pushing past the point where her body wanted to quit. 5 minutes. The arena had gone quiet. Even the critics seemed transfixed by the sight of a human woman, injured and small, refusing to drop a piece of metal that was clearly destroying her. 6 minutes. Bella's knees buckled. She went down, but kept the pole, upright, holding it from a kneeling position. The sand bit into her knees. Her entire body was screaming. But Pip was alive because she'd endured worse. This was just metal, just weight, just pain. When she finally couldn't hold it anymore, when her muscles simply stopped responding to her brain's increasingly frantic commands, the pole fell. She collapsed beside it, gasping. 8 minutes, 32 seconds. She knew because Gorshek announced it. "The human endures past the point of reason," he said, and his voice carried something that might have been respect. "The average Silrathi warrior lasts 6 minutes. You exceeded this while injured. But there is still the third trial." Bella forced herself upright. Everything hurt. Everything had hurt before, but now it was personal. "The third trial," Gorshek said, his hand moving to the ceremonial blade, "is the trial of truth. You will face me. I will attack. Your instinct will be to fight back, to protect yourself. But if your intent was truly selfless, if you truly acted to protect and not for personal gain or glory, you will show this in how you respond to threat." He picked up the blade, and the arena went dead silent. "I will not kill you," Gorshek said, "but I will test you. Defend yourself however you choose, human. Show us who you truly are." Bella stood, swaying slightly. Behind Gorshek, she noticed something. A small statue, a representation of a Silrathi cub, positioned as part of the trial setup. Gorshek moved, fast, impossibly fast for something his size. The blade came around in an arc that would leave a nasty cut if it connected. Bella didn't block, didn't dodge. Instead, she moved toward the statue, putting herself between Gorshek's blade and the carved cub. The blade stopped a centimeter from her shoulder. Gorshek struck again, from a different angle. Again, Bella positioned herself to shield the statue, taking a glancing blow that sent fresh pain shooting through her side. "Fight back," Gorshek growled. "Defend yourself properly." "No," Bella said, through gritted teeth. "Not while the cub's in danger." 3 more strikes. 3 more times Bella moved to protect the statue instead of herself. On the last one, she took a hit that opened a cut on her arm, blood immediately welling up. But the statue remained untouched. Gorshek stopped. He looked at Bella, bleeding and exhausted, and still positioned protectively in front of the carved cub. Then he looked up at the gallery, at Pip, who was straining against his father's hold. The war chieftain lowered his blade. "I understand now," he said quietly. Then, louder, to the entire arena, "This human does not fight. She protects. This is not the behavior of a political operative or a manipulator. This is the behavior of one who sees a child and knows only that the child must be safe. She passed the drone that day not seeing a Silrathi cub, not seeing a diplomatic opportunity. She saw a youngling in danger, and she did what any true guardian would do." He removed his war helm, and Bella saw his face fully for the first time. Old, scarred, and carrying a grief so deep it had become part of his features. "I lost my own cub," Gorshek said, 10 years past, on a station not unlike this one. A malfunction, an explosion, and no one moved to help. they saw a Silrathi child and thought only of politics, of risk, of whether intervening would cause problems. My son died while people calculated whether saving him was worth the trouble. The arena was absolutely silent now. You did not calculate, Gorshek continued, looking directly at Bella. You moved. You paid for that movement with your flesh and blood. And now I understand that the anger I carried, the rage that brought this fleet here, was never truly about you. It was about every person who could have saved my son and chose not to. He knelt, bringing himself closer to Bella's eye level. You are declared Shimara, kin by blood, born of another. Only 5 non-Silrathi in 2,000 years have earned this honor. You are the 6th. Bella, exhausted and in pain and overwhelmed, managed to whisper, Does this mean no war? Gorshek's laugh was surprised and genuine. No war, small human. The fleet withdraws. You have shown us something we thought impossible, that bonds of protection transcend species when honor truly guides the heart. In the gallery, Pip finally broke free from Ramoth's grip and raced down to the arena floor. He reached Bella just as her legs decided they were done with the whole standing thing, and she collapsed against his scaled side. Told you I was okay, she mumbled into his shoulder. Soft One is strongest person Pip knows, the cub said solemnly. Bella laughed, which hurt, which made her laugh more. I'm really not. I'm just stubborn. Same thing, Silas called from the gallery, and somehow that seemed to sum up the entire absurd, painful, impossible week. 3 months later, Bella was back in her garden, tending to her phosphorescent moss. It was still humming, still temperamental, still requiring more attention than any plant had a right to demand. But now she had help. Pip visited every day after his lessons, carefully watering the specimens while asking endless questions about bioluminescence, photosynthesis, and whether moss had feelings. The Silrathi fleet had withdrawn. Gorshek had returned to his people, but not before formally adopting Bella into his clan as well, which meant she was now technically related to 2 of the most powerful Silrathi families in the galaxy. This is weird, right? She'd asked Silas. This entire situation is completely weird. You jumped in front of a plasma blast and accidentally became a galactic ambassador, Silas had replied. Weird stopped applying about 10 steps back. Now, watching Pip gently mist a tray of seedlings while humming tunelessly, Bella thought about the drone, the pain, the trials, and the moment when she'd seen a kid in danger and simply moved. She'd do it again, in a heartbeat, without thought or hesitation. Because some things, like keeping kids safe, didn't require calculation or consideration. They just required being human, with all the reckless, impulsive, protective instinct that came with it. The moss is happy today, Pip observed, his head tilted as he listened to the humming. It sings differently. Yeah, Bella agreed, smiling despite the lingering ache in her back. I think maybe we're all singing a little differently these days. And in the garden, where everything had changed, where a plasma blast had nearly ended one life and somehow brought entire species closer together, the moss hummed its contentment, while a human and a Silrathi cub tended the growing things together. Because that's what happens when you stop seeing species and start seeing people. When you stop calculating costs and just act on what's right. The galaxy had learned that lesson the hard way. But maybe, Bella thought, as Pip carefully transplanted a seedling with his claws, that made it stick better.